So for people that don't know you, Kevin, tell us a little about who are you, what do you do?
So yeah, my name is Kevin Hoare. I am currently an online coach. I've been had been a in-person coach for 5 years, before becoming an online coach when COVID had hit. So I had about a year's experience, a year and a half's experience of in-person coaching before I moved over to London. Did a couple of years over in London. Basically learning how to get really good results with clients, which was, absolutely, it was probably one of the best moves that I made, going over and really learning, in the trenches, how to achieve the best results with a large variety of clients. So then, basically took that knowledge that I accrued over in London, came back to Ireland in 2019, I think it was, and then set up my own company from there. And I've been kind of going at it. So I was building kind of a mix between an online and a one-to-one business from 2019. And then COVID hit, and obviously I was like, fuck, like most people were in our industry. And basically then just took the plunge with going mainly towards online. Saw the benefits of it and saw how I could kind of increase my impact by working online rather than being completely tied to the gym floor. And it's been great since. So it's one of those things where before COVID, I suppose I was a little bit ignorant to what was possible in terms of the service that you can provide online and the results that you can get with clients. And just from delving into that, working with various mentors on how to improve my service, and then really deliver what I felt like I could deliver in person in an online format has been the focus since COVID began till now. So
cool. I mean, like, obviously for those who don't know the friendship me and Kevin have, other than sitting in Honest Burger, Kevin was one of my early mentees in London. And like, I think it's similar to what I was saying in the Alex Searle interview. Like, both you share a very similar trait, that coming into the gym and going into that one-to-one environment, that you had an incredible attention to detail, incredible like hunger for results, and managed to pick up steam quite quickly in terms of getting results. How did you find that in terms of a transition between going from the one-to-one where you had control of everything to going into online where it was maybe a little bit more, you had to get that across through a digital platform?
Yeah, it was really tough actually, because when I thought online coaching initially, I thought, okay, you provide someone a training program, you provide someone a nutrition plan, they check in once per week. Obviously, you maybe check in with them informally throughout the week, and that was kind of it. And I was kind of thinking, how do you get across the same level of service that you can provide in person in an online format? Like, if I look back, even it's crazy when you look back over say a 12-month period at how much can change. But when I look back at the service that I was providing back then, while that was to the best of my ability back then, it's just because I wasn't aware of the other stuff that I could add. For example, video check-ins, like, they've been an absolute game changer for me, where I can really, I can get across absolutely everything that I want to get across in a 10-15 minute check-in video for a client, and give them as much information that I'd want to give them. Because I think one of the big things about in-person coaching is that you have obviously a lot of contact time with your clients, because you're spending time with them on the gym floor once, twice, 3 times per week. But you have great conversations in between sets, and you get to impart a lot of your knowledge onto clients, and they get to ask questions. And so for the big focus for me really over the last year has been opening those channels of communication so that clients are able to ask those questions, and I'm able to give as good a response through things like video, through things like voice notes, stuff like that. And I think, just making sure that you're asking the right questions to get the right information out of your client, and then kind of going from there and seeing what they're struggling with along the way.
Yeah, I think I was in a very similar boat, like transitioning more into the online thing. It's like a lot of the, I remember being known for like very good retention, and a part of that was, it was never, I was particularly good at admin. And if you remember how shoddy I was at that for most of my early career. But like, it was that ability to be able to portray what I've learned, portray my experience, be able to create an actual personal bond with a client, which is very difficult over the online format, especially early on when that client is necessarily, they're unsure, they don't know you as well. And I'm assuming, what have you added into your business that you feel that's helped you, whether it's before they come up to sale or once they get set up, that helps people like get to know who Kevin is and creates that bond that you can't really get in the same way?
Yeah, good question. So I've played around with a couple of different formats for like the onboarding process with bringing new clients into the business. And I think the biggest thing that I've implemented over the last, say, 6 months that's really been, game changing for me with the actual service that clients get from the word go is when they sign up, they've got access to like a video guide from me on just simple things like what they need to do to get started. So how to work the app that I use for coaching, how to fill in their questionnaire, how to upload their progress pictures. But these are videos of me going through those things. So they kind of get my personality across. Obviously, before that, they'll have had a Zoom call for me to chat with them and see if we would actually work well together. So I'm not looking to take everyone who inquires on. I'm looking to take the right fit on, obviously, so that the whole coaching experience on both ends is as good as it can be. And then as well as that, I've played around with a couple of different things where I've either done setup videos and kind of sent setup videos to people with their plans, and they're, say, like 20-25 minute videos when I've written their nutrition and training programs and then sending them over. But I think through trial and error, because I was doing Zoom calls for that setup, then I went to the setup videos, but I think through trial and error, I've realized that I probably need to do the Zoom call and maybe just record that and send it over. You know what I mean? So simple things like that. I think, to be honest with you, it's like any other industry now where, the pandemic has created these barriers of not having that human connection. But things like Zoom, it's everyone is so used to using it now that if I see a client is struggling, or if I have, say, a new client who's come on, I'll kind of put my diary right 3 or 4 weeks after their start date. We're going to have a catch-up Zoom call. And that's just giving that personal touch. It makes the client feel great because they're like, this is excellent. I get to, if there's any major questions they forgot to ask in check-ins or whatever, we get to catch up. But also, like I said, people are so used to using Zoom now that that weirdness of the first couple of months of using it is kind of gone. And this is just how people are used to communicating now. So I think that definitely helps when it comes to building a relationship with online clients, for sure.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Certainly when it comes to one of the benefits from this pandemic is almost making social media and things like coaching more personable and more social again. Like, I remember, like, we all know we're bombarded with how terrible social media is for us these days and how it's taken away our social relationships and it's making us addicted. But like, I've got people that are, like, I would consider friends now that I've never met, that I've just got chatting to on Instagram because I like their content. Like Paul Standel, who was episode 1 of this podcast, I've never met him in person, not once. Yeah. And like, it's, same thing in terms of like being able to, now things that would have barriers to entry, like getting someone on a Zoom call, they'd have to download it, they'd have to know what it is, where it's now, you've already taken away those barriers. That makes just like getting to know someone that much easier, I suppose, right?
Yeah, that's it. And I think the whole social media thing, like, it's like anything, it's got positives and negatives, and too much of anything is not going to be a good thing. People always talk about the drawbacks of social media. Usually the drawbacks of social media come from your use of social media, and how you choose to spend your time on whatever platform it's on. It's that old story of, if you want to find negative stuff, you'll find it in abundance online. If you want to find positive stuff, you'll find that in abundance too. And I think, in my opinion, like social media, Zoom, all of the different things that have kind of made it easier to communicate during the pandemic, they've been potentially, they've been great for a lot of people. They've allowed people to stay connected, and that definitely feeds over into online coaching. And that's, I think, because of the development of these different platforms. I mean, I only started using Screencast, for example, in the last year. I don't know if that was around, over a year ago. No idea. Had never had a use for it. But even like having things like that, having tools like that available to you, it definitely has a crossover into online coaching and making that a lot more personal than just a couple of emails or something like that.
So like, we've obviously looked at a little bit of here of like how we've like used online to digest some of the good parts about that one-to-one that are a little bit different. For the people that like the people that listen to this will probably be like 2/3 coaches, 1/3 people looking to like get themselves in shape. For the coaches listening to this, now you've spent a good part of your career doing both. We see a lot of online coaches now that have never set foot on the gym floor. What are the things that you found that you think were the most valuable lessons that have either helped your coaching practice going forward, or that was like a must in terms of getting it when you transitioned over?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is seeing lots of different bodies and how they move on the gym floor. And then, obviously their exercise execution, seeing how different things suit different people, seeing how you have to kind of think on your feet sometimes on the gym floor. And, if something's not working or someone's not feeling something in the right place, you need to get hands on. And I genuinely believe that you can only provide a really good online service if you've been on the gym floor in person, hands on with people like that. Maybe people will disagree with me on that one, but I think it's one of those things that once you've done it, once you've been on the gym floor for a number of years and you've done, thousands of PT sessions, you can see things or you look back on it with a perspective of like, geez, I'm glad I have that experience now that I'm going into an online thing. Even down to things like exercise selection. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
I'm sorry, I thought my screen went black there. I thought it went off.
Yeah.
Even down to things like exercise selection and the flow of your programming, like all of these things come into it. So yeah, I think the time that I spent on the gym floor has been absolutely essential for pretty much everything. It's pretty much the backbone of everything that I do online now.
I think when it looks at, if you're looking at being a coach for body composition, I touched on this in Alex's episode, but I think there's just two things I feel that are really crucial for getting results in an online space well and consistently. Is one, having that gym floor experience and having gone through that process yourself. And I feel like, again, like strength coaches may come back at me and say something different for performance, but like there's so much of a mental aspect in terms of getting in shape. If you've never been there yourself, you can't empathize. If they're not following the diet on paper, you can't understand the rationale behind why they're not doing it, why they're self-sabotaging. In the same way, when it comes to being on the gym floor before transitioning online, it's like you should say, like seeing different bodies, you could probably look at a client and immediately go, oh, I want to build big quads, or I want to build a big chest. You can look at the rib cage, you can look at the length of his legs and go, do you know what? I'm probably not going to put back squats and flat bench press in that program. Whereas other people have never been on the gym floor, they just see bench press, good chest, back squat, good quads. And then when they're not growing, they're just banging their head against the wall. Or if a client gets hurt, they don't know, what do I do to adjust this? And you had on the fly, had a client come in and go, slept funny, I've hurt my back today, and had to completely change your program on the fly based around them. And that's formed the way you now think of programming, right? You can probably do the same online.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And even down to like looking at someone's photos and thinking, okay, I've seen a similar body to this before, and what worked well there. Obviously it's not going to be a perfect crossover, and you're not going to have two people who are completely genetically the same, but like you can look at someone and say, right, like you just said there, this exercise is going to suit this person, this exercise is likely not going to suit this person, and you can kind of play around with it. And it's maybe not a perfect science, but like, because I mean, as well as I know, like we probably know people with exactly what you just talked about there, who can perfectly squat and perfectly bench press, but like it's giving yourself the best opportunity to get the best results with the information that you have. And I think that's what the in-person stuff gives you. And And yeah, like that experience with the in-person stuff, I think anyone looking to become an online coach, you would I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you haven't spent time on the gym floor with people in person.
Agreed. And like you look at that, we talked about being able to show the empathy, we talked about being able to come down to exercise selection and programming, but also just like you said at the start, one of the first things you mentioned was like how to create that communication and that buy-in with people on an online format. And if you've never learned how to communicate with people in person, if you've been by your laptop since you were coming out of PT school, it's like, do you know how to communicate with a stressed out lawyer mum of 3 differently to an alpha male stockbroker? The words you use, the check-in responses you use, like the targets you set are all going to be different. And that's hard to get when you've only ever communicated with people via email.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And one of the things that I always used to say, to, let's say, other in-person coaches who would look for advice on different things or how to, say, build a connection is like, you have to kind of make that client, just like you make that client in person, try to obviously get results and, do the work and all those things that are obviously necessary to create the adaptations that we want to create. Like, they also have to enjoy their time, because a lot of the time, let's say, especially when we were in London, we're working with people who haven't got an awful lot of time. Their time is very valuable, and creating an experience in a PT session was absolutely imperative if you are going to retain that client long term, long enough to get a result even. And I think that same there's that much, or there's the same level of importance when it comes to making someone enjoy the online service. If you jump on a Zoom call with someone, but you've never had the experience of conversing with someone in their shoes, then it becomes very, very difficult for you to relate to them. And then anything that you try and say to them, you could be the best coach in the world, but anything that you try and say to them, if you can't relate to them on a personal level, they're probably going to be like, oh, I don't like this guy, so I'm not going to listen to what he's saying. I think that, and that comes down to personal skills as well, and being able to know the person that you're talking to, know the way that they kind of want to be spoken to, and then speaking to them and delivering the information that you're trying to deliver at their level, which I think is really important.
I think that's a really, really huge point that you brought up there about like making that client experience and making them, enjoy the process. Because I always find like, and again, there's always going to be an element of this because we deal with people at the end of the day, and people buy into people, and people work hard for people. We've all had experiences with like, even at work, with good managers that we'll want to work for, and we'll go out of our way to work for. And we've had experiences with bad managers that we don't want to work for. And the only thing that's different is the personal connection. But I think it's more important when we're dealing with your day-to-day person. I think the serious strength athlete, the serious bodybuilder, like, yes, they've got to get on, but like I always say that like a strength athlete maybe doesn't necessarily care so much about building muscle as long as they're getting stronger, although one will come with the other, all the performance improves. The bodybuilder doesn't necessarily care the weight on the bar goes up as long as they're getting bigger, although I'm sure one will prove the other. But I always find that like Gen Pop, for use of a better term, sort of client is somewhere in the middle, because it's like, yeah, the goals are closer to that bodybuilder, but if they don't see numbers going up in the bar, they don't feel they've had a good session, if they don't leave feeling they've had a good of a pump, they don't feel they're enjoying that hour, are they less inclined then to go and follow the diet and stick to it and do everything else? And I found that nearly always the best results come from the people that enjoy that process, that love their training, because they have a great session. You go, I don't want to ruin this with a honest burger. That's just us that ruin it with an honest burger. Like, the question I want to ask you on this is, how do you define an experience?
Good question. I gauge it from and this is because everything is obviously online. I gauge it mainly from the client's engagement in the whole plan. So I can tell if a client is enjoying the experience, if they're getting every single training session done, they're doing things as simple as tracking the metrics that I've asked them to track. They're checking in on time. They're ticking the boxes essentially. There's a marked difference between the clients who are really enjoying the process and their adherence to everything that you've set out for them. And then also there's a difference between those guys and then the people who come on board who maybe don't want it as much as they say they do. And they're not ticking the boxes, not doing all those things that I've said. And that usually leads me to be like, okay, it's a bit of a red flag. We probably need to jump on a call a little bit sooner than I would with a regular client, let's say. I think that combined with when you do catch up with a client, like what's their enthusiasm like for the plan as a whole, what's their enthusiasm like for their goals. One of the big things that, and you'll know this from the past, like I've always been big on setting tangible goals for our clients, especially Gen Pop clients, because they haven't got we look at, say, a bodybuilder or an online coach or a coach in general. They know that, okay, if I just tick the boxes on a daily basis, I'm going to get results because I'm going in, I'm nailing my training, I'm getting stronger, I'm sticking to my food, all that sort of stuff. Whereas a lot of Gen Pop clients haven't got that prior experience of, okay, if I do this, it's going to work. A lot of people have tried some shoddy things in the past, maybe some fad diets, things haven't worked exactly as they want. So even though they're coming at you with a certain level of confidence because they know, like, and trust you from consuming your content or whatever, they don't necessarily know that this is going to be the thing that's going to actually get them in shape. A lot of people come, and I'm sure you get this yourself, a lot of people come with the sort of like preconceived notion of, okay, yeah, I've seen that this coach can get results, but I'm different because of X, Y, and Z. So like when you're looking at the experience that people are getting online, just to come back to your question, I think it's basically a combination of looking at everything that you've given them and asked them to do, I suppose, on a weekly basis. And how well are they doing that? Are they checking in with yes or no answers, or are they blowing you away with the amount of info they give you? And I always think not only the best results come from the ones who are blowing you away with the amount of info they give you, but they're also the ones who are likely the most engaged and enjoying the process the most,
100%, 100%. I think linking it in for what I was looking at in terms of the one-to-one experience, in terms of, I feel when people look at experience in one-to-one, I feel there's a disconnect between what coaches feel their experience need and what the clients actually want from an experience in a lot of cases. And because and you hit the nail on the head there, talking about setting tangible goals, making sure they're engaged in the process, making sure what you're doing in the process is linked to what they're looking to set out to achieve. And I find that sometimes it goes out the window when people get into one-to-one going, well, we've got to do burpees because if they're not tired, they're not getting the experience. So we've got to do conditioning work I get them on a prowler every single session. Otherwise I've been guilty of this too. And I stopped and I went, have I ever got really excited for doing loads of prowler sprints? And have I ever had a client go to me going, could we skip these bicep curls because I really want to get to the reverse sleds? Never ever. And I sat there and going, why do I feel that this is the experience when I'm deliberately not doing what they want because of it? So going into sort of like our topic that we're going to go into in terms of actually like building muscle and muscle growth, this of course segues on nicely in terms of sort of like the experience. I got a question on my Instagram box the other day: is what's more important, just lift the weight or time and attention and tempo? And obviously we spoke a little bit about off air about exercise execution in the online and one-to-one world. How important do you feel that exercise execution is, and how important do you feel is like progressive overload in terms of getting results? Where's your thoughts on this?
In my opinion, they're completely intertwined, and they have to be, because you could have the picture perfect exercise execution, but if you don't have the progressive overload and you don't have someone working hard in that movement, then you've just got a really pretty looking exercise that's not going to cause any sort of adaptation. Like if you're not increasing one variable, be it reps, weight, they're probably going to be the two main things that you increase. Obviously you could increase through sets as well, but if you're not increasing some variable and increasing your volume from session to session, then you're not going to see the results that you're looking to achieve from that exercise. So I think that, as with most things, like, the answer is not one or the other. They have to be intertwined. They both have to be employed when you're looking at, someone getting the most out of a training session or out of a training program as a whole. I've been guilty in the past when I had started out in-person coaching through ignorance. I didn't know that I didn't know you could go this deep into exercise mechanics, and having done RTS now and looking at all these things, looking back on my first, say, year of being a coach, I was, if I could see a CCTV camera of some of the sessions that I brought people through, I'd probably be quite embarrassed. But like, that's I think it's almost like a rite of passage, right? You kind of learn things as you go along, and really, when you see the difference of a client performing a movement to the best of their ability, to for them to get the most out of that exercise, and combining that with obviously the hard work that's required to get the results. The difference between that and just getting someone to go into the gym and train hard and throw some weight around is massive. So yeah, I don't think you can separate the two at all.
No, I completely agree with you. Just on a little bit of a tangent, just as I was something I thought as you were speaking there. But this is a complete inside joke, by the way, for anyone listening to this who doesn't know us. But I feel like I've permanently scarred you for life when you said RTS. For anyone that doesn't know, I used to take the mick out of Kev on a weekly basis for saying "or" instead of "r." And now in the last couple of times I've spoke to you on Zoom, you've been saying "r," and I'm like, "Oh man, I've crippled the guy. I've ruined his accent for life."
I'm fairly sure I only do that when I'm talking to British people as well. Like, I'm fairly sure I get slagged on the other side if I said "r" over here.
Yeah, or yeah, you can't win in this circumstance, can you?
Yeah, exactly.
But going back onto the topic, yeah, I think like that's the key thing. They are very much intertwined, and it's sort of the answer that I gave as well, in terms of like if you're just into the habit of throwing weight around, if you can't create tension on a particular tissue, is you're progressively overloading your dumbbell presses, but is your chest growing? Is your triceps getting most of it? Is your front delts getting most of it? Is it nothing? Is it just momentum? Where on the flip side, if you're just lifting 2 kilo dumbbells because you want to maintain the squeeze, you're not kind of getting the kind of the best of both worlds, right?
Exactly. And I think even if you look at it from a longevity standpoint, like if we look at the example that you just said there with the dumbbell press, personally, and for what I want for every single client that I work with, I want them and I want myself to be able to train forever. Like, I know the health benefits of training as you age, and training for me is a really, really important part of my entire schedule. So I want that to remain there for as long as possible into the future. And if you're going into the gym and you're banging around weights and you're moving in ways that are maybe not optimal for certain joints, over time they're going to scream at you and they're going to let you know. So I think people who shout about, like I've seen a lot on social media of people saying that, or I've even put up some videos actually of sort of proper exercise execution, in my opinion. And you get people commenting like, "Oh no, a little, there should be more swing in here," or stuff like that. It's like, well, at what cost? Or if you're in a dumbbell press, pushing yourself into a range that you don't own, you might not feel that now. You can do it 1,000 times without any pain, and then the next time that you do it, you know what I mean, you can cause some issues. So it's like looking at it from a risk reward standpoint of, you're going to get better results if you nail your exercise execution and work hard. Obviously, you can't get one without the other. But you're also going to protect your joints. You're also going to keep yourself healthy for as long as possible, so that you can keep training and hopefully doing the thing that you love for as long as possible as well. I think that's a major point.
There's so much to unpack in that point. I think that's really important, and especially when we know that, like, fat loss, we've all seen the fat results happen 6, 10, 12, 20 week results, but like muscle building takes like considerably more time. And if you don't have a strategy that has longevity involved in that, then you're on borrowed time. You're only going to be able to build so much muscle, because when you start losing range, when you start picking up injuries, you're going to be limited about how effective this training is because of what you did 5 odd years ago.
Exactly. And that's a huge thing, and especially if we're looking at overall health from even let's say from a nutrition standpoint. People bang on all the time about overall health from your nutrition, and making sure that your nutrition is set up in such a way that you can try and strive. I'm not going to say achieve optimal health, but try and strive for optimal health in that regard. But I think you've got to have health at the forefront of your mind when it comes to programming as well. I think that's a major thing. And I think it's one of those things, like a lot of things in the fitness industry, where people go into different camps of like, oh, I'm almost like team work hard and I'm team execution. It's like, I'm sorry, but have you ever, set up a hack squat in such a way where you're working in the range that you can own and work to true failure on that? Like, it's a lot different than feeling like you're working hard because you're blowing out your arse by the end of the set, but really you've still got 2 or 3 reps left because you're bouncing off the bottom and shouting the roof down. It's in my opinion, when you set up exercises in a certain way and you are working within the ranges that are obviously unique to you, and you're working hard in those ranges, that's when you can create the most difficult challenges for the muscles that you're trying to target. And I think people miss that. They just assume, he's all into execution, he doesn't work hard. It's not the case. It's got to be both.
I'm so glad you said that. And I think with the emergence of RTS and the exercise mechanics stuff and all that kind of thing, is you tend to find, as you say, people go into sort of 2 camps, and understanding that people go into these camps either because they don't understand it for the most part. And like I've seen it before, when you're looking at people reverse banding exercises or using cables instead of dumbbells for stuff, and they'll be like, oh, this is too much effort, let's just lift some weight. And I'm just like, well, if I'm doing this not to make it easier, it's to make it consistently hard and consistently brutal through every inch of every second of the rep. Like if I do this right, it makes things harder, not easier. But it's just doing that in a way that's safe. It's a way that improving longevity. Exactly.
And that's actually one of the questions that I asked on RTS was, I basically asked, like, what, I think it was one of my first days. And I asked Michael, what's the reason for it all? What's the, if you were to kind of explain why to go this deep into exercise mechanics, what is the reason for it? And that was the answer that he gave. It was longevity. It was of course, you're gonna, if you understand how to look at all these different variables and program for someone in a way that makes them work within what they can own, but also work really hard, the results are going to be excellent. But then it's the longevity side of things, where that person is going to be able to do that 20 years later because you've nailed all the basics from the word go. Whereas if you're in that sort of team work hard camp and don't take any sort of exercise execution into account, then look 20 years down the line, you're probably not going to be training as hard as the guy who's looked after himself.
Yeah, and I think it's important, like anyone listening to this, it's whether you're a coach embarking on learning a bit of exercise mechanics stuff, or whether you're just a recreational trainee that wants to learn how to train smarter and harder, is, as you say, not falling into either side of the camp. I think I find problems with both sides of the camps where, people go down the exercise mechanics wormhole, and I'm sure, I know I certainly have gone too far down that route. I'm sure you probably have as well at times where, the range of motion becomes an inch, you're going for 4 reps in reserve because you don't want to press technical failure. But then we get people just swinging weight around because they just want to push hard. It's like, find where someone's range is, then train brutally hard in that until you get the response necessary.
Exactly. And I think the idea of 2 camps and saying that there's 2 camps, obviously we're only saying that because generally people do break off into those camps, but having 2 different camps for this is obviously a joke, because you need one, and you need them both, right? You need both of these things that we're talking about to create the changes that you want to create. So yeah, like I think that's really important. But as well, what's important to touch on there, especially like you said, for any coaches, let's say if there's some well, gym floor and online coaches, because obviously you should know the environment that your client has to train in. It also has to be realistic. So we might know that, for example, a cuffed cable lateral raise could be more optimal for the medial head of the deltoid than a dumbbell lateral raise. But if your client trains in a gym where it's basically impossible to get access to dual cables, then clearly you're better off programming in, let's say, a dumbbell lateral raise that they can definitely get done every single time they train. So it has to be realistic as well. Like I've coached on the gym floor in very, very busy, in a very, very busy one-to-one environment. And that's, again, comes back to having to think on your feet and realizing, okay, there's a time and place for doing that kind of stuff. And if you've got a client that trains at maybe a quiet time, you can be really selective with your programming. But then if you've got a client who comes in and 6, 7 a.m., one of the prime times that people are going to be getting coached in the gym, and there's PTs and clients everywhere, then looking at it and saying, okay, we need to just get some stimulus on the delts here. We're going to go with what's available. And that has to come into it. And I think that comes into it from an online standpoint as well. I have plenty of clients who I know train at 6, 7 p.m. in a really, really busy gym. And if I put in cuffed cable lateral raises, they're probably going to look at it and go, right, I'm going for a shower,
100%. I think it's, it's knowing, as you say, it's what's available to that client. I've known a lot of trainers that will go down the mechanics wormhole as well, and everything becomes reverse banded and front banded and contralaterally, ipsilaterally loaded, and there's all these different things at once. And it's like, I think I put a post about a few months ago, whereas if your exercise looks more like a sex swing than it does an exercise, it's probably too much work for most clients. Like understanding what is the important stuff here, and if your client's got time or the client has the urge to set that up, like it's all right. But like, I'll use an example, just like the guys at Muscle Mentors, Callum and Paul and Luke and all those guys, like they work with primarily guys that are really into the training, coaches, and like putting that stuff in for them is cool because they'll play around with it until it's right.
Yeah.
But like your father, a 2 stressed out lawyer, hasn't got the time to set it up, and if 2, are they going to set up to get what you actually wanted out of it in the first place?
Yeah, exactly. That was literally what I was about to say. Is like, you've got a lot of different variables. Let's take a reverse banded, incline press, for example, like a reverse banded incline Smith press, just to keep things easy. Like, if we look at that, you've obviously got, what resistance of what like kind of weight of band do you use, or what resistance of band do you use, how high or low do you set that up? Like, all these different things come into it. So if you're going to program it as a coach, you'd probably want to make sure that you've got some like very easy to follow detailed videos on like how to actually set those things up. But then the other side of it is that example that you just gave of someone, especially if we take a beginner client who hasn't got prior experience in a gym. There's 2 things there. First thing is, if they're quote unquote weak, or they haven't trained and they're looking to gain their first real sort of muscle tissue that they're on a focused plan for, then giving them any sort of stimulus is going to have the desired effect. Like, we don't necessarily need to go and give that person a reverse banded incline Smith press. Probably giving them an incline dumbbell press is going to create some adaptation there. And then the second thing is you could just easily completely overwhelm someone. So I think that again comes down to knowing your client, knowing the environment that they train in, and then knowing knowing what's going to suit them from a programming perspective. I don't think you can overstate that, really.
So when you're like, for the stuff you will incorporate in terms of like program design for people to aid with their longevity, like the simple stuff that everyone can just do in a busy gym, like, how do you get the point across to somebody who's maybe like young, early 20s guy that wants to build as much muscle as possible for the beach, who's used straight bar bicep curls as an example for the last like 4 or 5 years and thinks he's invincible and his elbow doesn't hurt now? So why should I care about it? Because if we look at all the people that do exercise mechanics stuff, 99% of them were people that did things like the straight bar bicep curl for a decade. Now their elbows messed up. Oh, okay, maybe now I should go. Why is this? Oh, okay, I'm now going to go to dumbbells. So if you get somebody coming to you who is at that earlier stage where they think they're invincible, how do you put that point across that this stuff's important for longevity when they might not care, they just want to get laid?
I think it's I think it's important to put that across. If you notice that that's the case, I think it's important to obviously jump on a call with them and then just talk to them and be like, look, you know, you've come to me for a reason. You've come to me because you see the results that I get with clients. The reason why I get the results that I get with clients is because of X, Y, and Z. And you know, basically, if you're going to get those results, this is what we need to do. But then also explaining the reasoning behind what you're saying. So explaining that, you know, if you do these things for a prolonged period of time, they can have that effect. And I think any rational person, when they hear the actual reasoning behind it, and they realize that, okay, this is more important than just someone trying to get me to slow down my reps, or someone trying to get me to change up my grip position or whatever. It goes deeper than that. It's not just because someone has an opinion. It's because, you know, this is one of those high risk exercises that could cause an issue down the road. Then I think any rational person would probably take that on board and realize, okay. But then also, what I like to do with people as well is, you know, get their feedback on certain movements and kind of say, right, like, how does that feel in comparison to the way it used to feel? And usually people will come back and say, oh yeah, I can feel, you know, this, or, you know, that example there, I can feel my biceps more with this or whatever. And then once you've done that, you've got them bought into that process, and it's kind of easy then to keep that going, I think. But if someone then, I mean, to be honest with you, I've never really had it where someone pushes back from a programming perspective. I might have someone say, you know, it's awkward doing this one in the gym because of X, Y, and Z, maybe a time they train or something, and then I might make a little tweak. But I've never really had someone push back and say, oh, I want to incorporate this or whatever, because I just kind of say no. I just have my program set up in a certain way, and I'll say, you know, you've come to me for coaching for a reason, so this is how the coaching works.
Yeah, I don't tend to get it with the example of bicep curls. You occasionally get with the big lifts, so people thinking that they want to squat because they feel they've heard that squats are good, or deadlift is good, or bench press is good. And like, I think, and then sometimes, like, I think it's also knowing like what's important again comes into this. Like, say about the bench press. Is it the best exercise for growing someone's chest? In most cases, no. But does it mean it can't be involved? Of course not. You can use that as an indicator lift, sort of going, right, this just shows whether the overarching view of my program is working. If my bench press is going up, then overall I'm getting stronger. But knowing that's not the greatest chest builder, maybe I'll include more cable flies, more dumbbell presses, more floor presses in my B's and C's and later down the program. Or if someone wants to squat, great, it's hip dominant squat because they're 7'4". All right, hat squats, leg extension. They go in later to balance out the stuff that's not happening in the initial part of the workout.
Yeah, that's it. And I think one of the and to be fair, like, one of the points that stuck with me from my very first personal training job, when I was working in Dublin before I went to London, was when programming, it's a little bit of what they want and a lot of what they need. And that, you know, if someone is going to enjoy their training program so much more because they have a bench press in there, and that's going to help them stick to the rest of their training program. They're also going to feel good about themselves because they've benched that day, so they're potentially going to stick to their nutrition. Obviously, we're talking about Gen Pop here because a coach would probably be, you know, probably understand things a little bit more than that person who just wants to bench. But like, if that's the case, I mean, they're still going to get some benefit out of the bench. Still going to get a lot of benefit out of the bench. You know, I mean, if someone's bench goes from 30 kilos to 70 kilos, you can be pretty sure that they're going to put on some muscle in their pressing, in their pressing muscles in their upper body. So I think it's that combination again of chasing down results while making sure that people are sort of satisfied and happy with the approach that they're taking as well. Because even if we look at, like, if we go back again to nutrition, like, there's things that we know will be the most optimal thing for someone to do to create the best results possible, right? Like, we know that if we stuck someone on an extremely strict diet and they were able to stick to it for long enough, then they're probably going to get the adaptation that we want. But there's always that toing and froing of, okay, if we look at how to make someone's nutrition enjoyable, then they're going to be able to adhere to it long enough to actually get those results in the first place. I think it's somewhat the same with training, but I think there definitely has to be more of that you can control and kind of explain, okay, this is why we're doing things, but this is in here for X, Y, and Z reason, you know?
Yeah, I suppose it's like a balancing act as well. We spoke about that with like the extra mechanics stuff earlier, like, and the overwhelm stuff of the online. It's when you're looking at like the program. You gave me a quote from You Learn in your early days. I'll give you one back. Did you ever work with Johnny Jacobs when you were in London, or did you start after Johnny left? So Johnny, Johnny was more of a strength performance coach, but he worked in our old employer. And Johnny said to me, and I was sitting there making programs every 4 weeks, because 4 weeks is the time a program lasts. And and he just looked at me and goes, "Why are you changing it?" And I went, "Well, they might get bored." And he went, "Is the client bored of your program, or are you bored of your program?" Because that client, you might do a variation similar-ish to that program, slightly tweaked for the individual, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9 times a day, whereas that client does it once a week. And the biggest reason, in a way, and I suppose we can touch on this now, but I find that people struggle to put on muscle is because they're program hopping, they're jumping, they're looking for variation, so they don't actually know if they're creating that progressive overload. They're not actually spending enough time getting stronger on a lift because they're too busy changing something every 3, 4, 5 weeks. And if you're progressing, why change it?
Exactly. I did a prep for a photo shoot from June or July, I think it was July last year, until November, which is like July, like 5 to 6 month prep. I think 5 month prep. I don't think my program changed, like, from the start of the prep to the end, and I wouldn't have wanted it to either, because a couple of reasons. Like, my strength was increasing pretty much every single session. So, or at least on a weekly basis, on average, my strength was increasing until like the last, I think, 2 weeks or something, when obviously I was hanging out my arse. But, that's just part of it. But like, the other side of it is, I would not like to be when I change programs, so I've literally just had a program change in the last 2 weeks. And my last few sessions, while I've still had good sessions, like, I'm finding numbers, and I'm kind of going in and I'm like, okay, that works for that rep range. That was a bit light there, that was a bit heavy there, and you're kind of leaving notes in your logbook. And then that to me, you've only after, say, 2 weeks of doing your new program, maybe 1 to 2 weeks, are you really ready to go in then and be like, right, these are my numbers, I have my set numbers now, and I'm going to try and progress these. That would drive me mad if I had to do that every month or every 2 months. I want to be on a program for 4, 5, 6, 8 months at a time, until I stop seeing the adaptation occur. Because I totally agree. I think that a lot of people just change programs because they think that they need to keep their client occupied with a program change, when really, if you can show a client your strength is here and it was here, they're going to be absolutely delighted with that. Who wouldn't want to see that progress over time with their training?
Yeah, I find once you kind of like, you get through those first sort of like barriers where people start, it's like weight loss, right? People struggle with the diet, so they see it's working, and then they're flying. And the same thing with training. It's like they're asking for program updates, and then all of a ssudden they see that the bench press is starting to go up, or the deadlift's starting to go up, and like, you remember Bex, right? My crazy deadlifter, or May is another example. And both of them, once they kind of got into it, was like, if I threatened to take deadlifts out of their program, I wouldn't have made it out the gym. They would have killed me where I stand. And it's only because they got obsessed with getting stronger, and in turn they built a lot of muscle. And I think I remember Christian Thibodeau at a seminar I did with him. He was like, he doesn't plan deloads. You start with new programs of deload. And I know that's sort of a different topic, but it explains your point that, like, it takes a week or two to get into a program, then like give it time to really make do the job you want it to do.
Exactly. But I think, again, that comes down to communication as a coach, and saying to your client, from the get-go, that, your program isn't going to change every month, because we're not here to entertain you. It's not, this is like, we're here to get results. We're here to do the work, and we're here to make progress. And this is the way that happens. Probably the only exception to that, I would say, is maybe like with home programming over lockdown, because everything else was so mundane that some things had to change a little bit, especially for people with minimal equipment. But like, when you're looking at a gym program and a new client, I think that that if people understand your reasoning from the outset, and you explain, okay, we're going to stick on this program for, the next X number of weeks, and you're going to really focus on seeing your strength progress. Because so many people, when they come to you as a coach, if people are coming to you, let's say, and it's their first coach that they've had, maybe they've got some experience of going into the gym. They've probably got some experience of going into the gym and not really following a plan, just kind of going in and doing X, Y, and Z. And they can keep themselves occupied by going to this machine on a Monday and some other machine on a Wednesday and swapping that around every week. Whereas the thing that you need to get across as a coach is, we're not just going into the gym and doing exercises. We're going in with a focus of, I need to progress these numbers from last week. And when you flip that focus and go in with that, I think people stop kind of looking for those program changes as early, because they're no longer trying to get that entertainment factor from a change in program. They're like, oh, what can I change in terms of how strong I am today? I think when you spark that enjoyment, or when you spark that desire from people, then they realize, right, this is not about me getting a new program every month. It's about me progressing and owning the exercises on my current plan. And then going from there. I think that's so important. I think a lot of people maybe don't get that across initially, and then they wonder why their clients look for different programs. And it's just because they haven't communicated things as well as they should have from the outset.
Yeah, 100%. Setting expectations is I was saying in a previous episode that, like, when I'm going through my members area and I have like initial like welcome content of key things to sort of get the most out of the program. And I looked at I've recorded all the videos. One of them was setting expectations, and it was 16 minutes long. I was like, should I cut this down? Is that a bit too much? I was like, no, because it's the most important video that will ever go in this members area. Like, knowing what you need to expect from whether it's a weight loss perspective, a target perspective, a gym perspective, like you're setting yourself up for failure if you haven't done that already. Your problems will find themselves rather than, you getting rid of them before they even come up.
Yeah, 100%. Because people, like you said, it's, people know what to expect then. They realize that motivation tends to slowly drop off after the initial peak. Like they realize these things are normal. So instead of allowing that to be the thing that completely derails their progress, they're in a better position. They're better equipped to deal with that. So yeah, I think it's really, really important. I think that for any coach out there listening to this, like, communication is absolutely paramount. It's how you put things across. It's how you say things, and it's obviously what you say that are going to either determine whether your client stays with you or gets the results that they want to get.
Yeah. So going into like your own experiences with it. So you obviously did your 5-6 month prep, finishing in November, you said, right? So how much?
Yeah.
How much progress? How much weight have you put on since November?
So in November, I was 75.4 kilos on the day of my shoot, 77 kilos the day after. No. I was 75.4 kilos a day of my shoot. I think it was. And then I held that body weight pretty much, between there and say 80 kilos from there until Christmas. Went to Dubai in between that and kind of wanted to, not be chubby by Dubai. So I'd kind of held that composition really. And then Christmas came. That was cool. Didn't really, go mad around Christmas or anything. I was on high enough calories by then. And now this morning, I literally weighed in at 94 flat, so 94.0 today. Holding pretty good body composition as well. So yeah, really happy with how things have gone. Like, it's just been, I've taken things really seriously in this gaining phase, and the goal is to compete in spring of 2022. So there's no real time to take the piss. It's a gaining phase now until the end of this year. I'll probably, well, I will likely be sort of over 100 kilos going into my prep, which is obviously quite exciting. So yeah, that's kind of the goal for me now at the minute.
Mate, that's like phenomenal progress. And obviously, like, obviously I saw you through your first photo shoot and the aftermath, and like you've never been the kind of person like blown after a shoot and stuff, but like I think it's safe to say like you never made that same level of progress from the first shoot afterwards to this time. What has been the lessons you've learned? What has been the difference makers that has allowed you to effectively like gain as much good weight as we assume good weight anyway as possible over the course of this last like 6-7 months?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing for me has been treating and to be fair, I've done this since I started working with my coach 2 years ago. I've treated my own training as importantly as I treat my clients, and that has been the biggest game changer. My coach is Alan. I think his Instagram is Alan the AKA Method. If anyone wants to go and follow him, but
give him a shout. It's definitely worth a shout after what he's done.
Oh, massively. And like basically when I went to Alan initially, I was in a position where, like a lot of coaches probably listening to this, where my focus was my clients, and that was great because I was getting really good results with clients, and that was excellent. Obviously, really good for my career, so to speak, and things like that. But I was definitely 100% guilty of putting more emphasis on work, and then just letting myself, my nutrition, my training, kind of drift. And it wasn't that I was like completely out of shape, but I just always knew that I wanted to get bigger, but my actions weren't lining up with what I was saying. So essentially what I've done is, so that shoot that I did in November was the accumulation of, say, a year and a half of work with Alan. And the reason why this gaining phase has gone so well is because when I say that I put as much emphasis on my own training as I do on my clients, that's true for every single variable now. So that's true for my nutrition, that's true for my training, it's true for my sleep, it's true for my recovery. All of these things that I definitely was not ticking off and was not looking after in the past. I'd have a mountain of work to do, and I'd have a 2-hour block or a 90-minute block blocked off in my diary for training, and I'd be like, I'll just do this programming that I need to get done, when really, being really strict on what I allow myself to do and don't do is the biggest thing for me. So really focusing on my training, really focusing on my nutrition, and just literally treating it as if it's paid time has been the game changer for me.
I think that's a really important thing, especially when we're looking at, I think if any client embarking on any goal, whether it's them embarking on a diet and taking ownership of that diet, but I think it more so when it comes to building muscle. Like, I know I'm in your boat, a lot of the times as well. And I've had times where I've taken it really seriously. I've let times where I've let work take priority. And obviously time that life's priorities change over a period of time, and you're in a good spot now to really push this as best you can. But like the things that I always found tricky for so many years was that, like, it's easy to get your head dialed in for 8, 10, 12, 20 weeks, your case, 28 odd weeks of dieting, but then building muscle is an infinitely longer process. Like, how have you managed to have that mental transition of being zoned into a goal that's 2-3 years away? You said tangible goals earlier on. There's no real tangible goals in quite the same way with your physique. So how have you managed that?
Yeah, I think to be honest with you, like, so I always wanted to be big. I always wanted to be bigger. I always wanted to, I think in some way, I always wanted to compete, but I never really put any sort of parameters around that. I never really put any actual like dates or anything like that in mind. And it was the one thing that even when, business has been going well, and you get the benefits from that. It was the one thing that was leaving me left unfulfilled, was not achieving the goals that I had in my mind for my physique. So I was like, well, I'm either gonna continue like this and just always be pissed off at the fact that I'm not getting any bigger, or do something about it. And to be honest with you, it's training and progressing my training it's one of my inputs. It's one of the things that I control, that I know makes me feel really, really good on a daily, a weekly, and monthly basis. And I thoroughly enjoy it. So it's kind of at a point now where I think I probably wouldn't know what to do if I wasn't training as consistently as I am. It's just been a whole sort of lifestyle shift away from just focusing on chasing just purely progress in my career and whatever, like financial progress, all that sort of stuff, and realizing that, okay, it's not the only thing that matters. Like the physique goal that I have is really my own, and it's something that I've really wanted for a long time. So if I'm going to achieve that, then I need to do what I'm currently doing to be able to get there. And also from a just because this does kind of come full circle, and it does intertwine into business, like I would love to be able to open myself up to working with clients who have goals to, say, compete, or commit to things like photo shoots. Although I have had some clients, obviously, general population clients doing photo shoots, and that's great. But I'd love to be able to open myself up to clients who have goals to compete. And like you touched on earlier, I think it's the most important thing, or one of the most important things as a coach, is to have walk the walk. So that comes into it as well,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think the thing that also applies is seeing it from both ends as well, right? Like I've worked with a few clients that have competed, and my experience of getting show lead, even though I've never stepped on stage, has helped me to a degree. But there's going to be that sort of barrier compared to a coach that has a number of clients competed, and they've competed themselves in terms of posing and lighting and the nerves around the experience. But I suppose if that's the transition you want to take your business, it's not just about, you could diet someone now to get on stage, but could you confidently get them on stage again in 2 years' time? Could you go show to show? And it's this learning experience now that I suppose it's teaching you how to go show to show. If like your last photo shoot was your show, this is now learning what you do in between, and having gone through that means you can better give that. It's like empathy, like we spoke about with dieting earlier, right?
Yeah, 100%. But also, like, I think if I was to put it into like one sentence as to why I've been able to stick with this gaining phase, and the kind of original question that you asked, it's just because since I've gotten on top of my recovery, since I've gotten on top of my stress, since I've gotten on top of my nutrition and training, I fucking love it. Like it's like when you compare that to yourself, when you haven't got those variables nailed down, and you literally feel like Superman compared to that. I remember being so lethargic, and just whenever I did do a training session, it was half-assed, and it was kind of like my head wasn't really in the game. Whereas, and I was a coach, and now when I compare that to now, it's just like everything just feels optimized. I'm tracking the necessary variables and making sure that I'm controlling everything that I need to control, and it's a really enjoyable process when you have all those things nailed down.
Yeah, I agree. I found as well, and I'm sure it will translate onto your clients. I found that the more engaged I am on my training and my recovery and my diet, putting aside that fact that I'm more energetic, so I give more back, my clients are more invested into it because they see what I'm doing. You're leading by example. You're being a leader rather than like do as I say, not as I do sort of attitude. And I know that even if you're not out of shape, and again, it's a fine line, because you want to be able to enjoy yourself and go out for an honest burger on a Friday, which I don't care if you're in prep, we're doing when I come back. But it's that fine balance between that little thing in the back of your mind, even though it's not that bad, and you're not eating really unhealthily, going, do I have a place telling my client to do this based on the fact that I'm not currently doing it myself?
Exactly. I had a really good question asked to me. I don't know who it was. Actually, I think it was a webinar. I think it was a webinar that I was on, and someone asked if you had, your clients on your shoulder for the day, would they be blown away, or would they be horrified at your habits? And when you kind of look at it that way as a coach, and you say, right, I'm getting my clients to look at their sleep, I'm getting my clients to look at their nutrition and their stress, and make sure that they're really staying on top of all those things. Yet I'm not doing those things myself, And fair enough, a lot of coaches will have the nutrition and the training side down, and that's great. But like, the big thing for me is looking at your recovery, looking at your stress levels, looking at your sleep, and making sure that they're kind of nailed down too. Because I know what it's like when you get busy with coaching. You can literally go from one day of one end of the day to the other, literally coaching, get your own training in, get your meals in, and then there's no real time left for yourself. And it's interesting because I used to think, I can do more. I can do more as a coach. I can take on more clients. I can do X, Y, and Z. It's fine. I can do it. When nobody is Superman. Nobody can take on an endless amount of work without controlling that on the back end, and without having time for yourself, and without having some downtime, without being able to chill out. And I think once I realized that, and I made that shift away from feeling as if I had to be working 24/7 and giving myself time back, I no longer saw it as I'm taking time away from work. I now see it as I'm taking time for myself so that I can continue to work hard for the long term. Because, it's like with business or with your, with coaching, like one good year doesn't make a good business. And if you've built that one good year just because you fucked off everything else in your personal life, it's probably not going to be sustainable.
Yeah. And I that's a really important thing that I think it's people don't take ownership of it, and people don't give themselves time away from work, and they don't make this a priority. And I remember vividly, like, I suppose it's, it's probably even worse for the people that naturally have that ability to hustle. Like, I remember vividly you in those times where you were like, nah, burnout's not a thing, doesn't happen. I remember having those conversations with you, and like, you're doing, tons and tons of sessions, 50, 60 sessions a week. You're cleaning the gym with your hands and knees with rubber gloves on behind the pullover. You're doing your admin, you're writing your programs. And like, it was incredible, and a thing of beauty. And I'm sure, and this is maybe a topic for another podcast, that taught you tons of lessons about how hard you can go. But it's like, now, having gone back and taken that step back, when you can dip into that, when you can't, when to take steps back, right?
Yeah, 100%. And a really important point on that is, like, nobody was putting pressure on me to do that. That was just a pressure that I put on myself to be like, I can do this. And it's like, fair enough if you can do it for a short space of time. But I think the point that you've touched on there, because it does marry into this, like, I just had an extremely busy week about 3 weeks ago, because the gyms just opened here in Ireland for the first time since the end of December, as we were just discussing before we jumped on this call. And like, it was literally just a week pretty much sat at the laptop program. Still got my training in, still got my nutrition in, because there are things that I won't let slide. But sleep, stress, and recovery were out the window. But that was a short space of time for a week. And then I basically made a hard cutoff and a rule that I was like, right, okay, there was a bank holiday on the Monday the 7th, there was a bank holiday here. I was like, right, I'm going to take that day off. I took half of the Sunday off before that, completely away from the laptop, like shut the laptop, basically just had my phone and did responses every 3 or 4 hours or whatever, and then just didn't look at it. Me in the past, I wouldn't have done that. I would have just been like, work really, really hard, probably would have found something to do on the Sunday, found something to do on the Monday, and then just worked all the way through. And by now, I'd probably be really feeling the effects of that. Whereas I think, like you said there, it's taught me how hard I can go, but it's also taught me, okay, I can go that hard, but not continuously, not forever, and not without having something that you can have scheduled in, or just having some downtime scheduled in for yourself, where you're not doing something, or you're not working 24/7. Because for me, I know there's some people that may be able to do that, but for me, I've proven to myself that doesn't work.
I think people who say they can do that for a long time and do that 24/7 are lying to themselves. And I will say this because I've seen countless, whether it's trainers, whether it's clients, that say this and it's hustle, and I don't need much sleep, and they all burn out. And I will say this: I have worked with lawyers, I have worked with bankers, I have worked with all these incredibly hardworking people. I have never met someone to this day that works as hard as you, ever. And like, I was like, he's going to burn out eventually. And you went longer than I've seen most people, hit the red light. And I think it's like, but you'll only be better for it now you've learned to find that balance, because you're now looking after yourself. And now when you do those bursts, you can do those bursts from a place of energy, from a place of, drive, as opposed to doing it when you're already on the edge, trying to just push that bit further.
100%. A friend of mine talks about it as like basically like business sprints and then pullbacks. And it's like, you can have a sprint week, but that has to be followed by some sort of pullback. Like, you can't just sprint all the time, because as we know, you sprint and you sprint and you sprint until you can't sprint anymore. And that's pretty much the perspective that I have now. It's like, okay, like I'm willing to do this. I mean, I run a young business. I have to be willing to, get going if needs be, if there's a really busy period of time. Like, that's unprecedented, where, I'm going to have to do X amount of programs in the space of a week because of the gym's opening, or in the space of a couple of weeks or whatever. But like, when those times hit, you just got to soak it up and do it. But you also have to allow yourself to have that little bit of time to yourself on the back end where you can reset, and then just make sure that you have it in the tank to be able to work that hard if you need to. Things can change so quickly, especially with COVID. They could turn around tomorrow and say, hey, gyms are closed next week. And you're like, well, fuck, here's another week of absolutely nailing it. But I'm in a position now where if that came up, I'd be like, okay, cool. I've taken loads of recovery over the last couple of weeks, so I'm kind of ready to go now if I need to. If I don't need to, happy days, because that just means my recovery from training and stuff is going to be better. So I think that I don't think you can lose when you start treating your own training, nutrition, stress, sleep, recovery as importantly as you treat your clients, because you're going to be able to provide your clients a better service. And even in the time that I do work, I'm more mentally alert, so I'm probably more efficient. So that time that I'm taking back for myself, I'm probably making up somewhere else, because of the fact that I'm operating at a higher level than getting through the day, rather than kind of taking it to the day.
Yeah. So if we were going to bring this into sort of a little bit maybe more specifics, and then sort of finish off with some of the key lessons in terms of if someone's looking to put on as much muscle as possible and do a stint, what things are the most important. If you're looking at initially, let's say I came to you tomorrow and I went, Kevin, I'm going to hire you, I want to build a lot of muscle over the next year. How would you look at approaching someone's training and nutrition? How would you start to build that sort of baseline for?
So obviously it depends on start point. I think regardless of whether someone wants to gain muscle, lose fat, a combination of both, you've got to look at the start point and see what, in my eyes, would be the most optimal way of going about it to make your goals come to fruition, I suppose, in a year's time. So let's say if someone came to me and I determined that they needed to lose some body fat, for example, in order to put themselves in a slightly better position to build, we might step into a slight fat loss phase, drop some body fat. I'm not talking about getting shredded, because we want to make sure that we don't, one of the reasons why we want to get someone in a better position to gain is we probably want to bring stress levels down. We probably want to put them in a really good position to gain. If we shove them far too lean, we could end up putting them in potentially a worse position than when they came to us with all those things. So there's kind of a fine balance. But bringing body fat levels into a place where you can maybe see some abs, I'd be pretty happy with stepping someone into a gaining phase from there. And then really obviously it's completely individual, so it's hard to know without someone in front of me. But with calories, let's say, if someone finishes their diet on, I don't know, 2,000 calories, let's just say, just to pick a random number out of the sky, I'd probably stair step calories up then. So bringing calories up by, say, 200, 250 a week until we find where that person starts to, let's say, maintain weight. And then once I get to that point, we'll go a little bit higher. Probably, we don't necessarily want to see weight like going on every single week and going on very quickly. So what I'd probably do is build calories up as high as I could, with that person maintaining their body weight, and then see how they're performing in their training, and then let their training performance dictate their next calorie increase. From a training perspective, obviously it comes down to what's going to suit that person, how many days they can train, what's their allostatic load. So, what are their exterior stresses away from training, work, life, all those commitments. How many sessions do I think they can commit to and recover from each week? And then obviously go from there, tracking all those variables, making sure that they're progressively overloading their sessions, and then keeping on top of the metrics that are going to be really important for us to know in order to know when to make nutrition or changing or training changes. Simple things like, body weight, steps, like all these things where you can look at how their body is actually responding to the level of activity that you've given them, the level of food that they're currently on, and then looking at all the other factors like sleep, hunger, digestion, all of these things, and keeping on top of those. So that's generally how we go about it. Obviously, it's hard to know without a sort of a case in front of you, if you get me, with an actual person.
So you mentioned there, it's interesting for people who are like maybe not the coaches, maybe people are just looking to build muscle, and taking someone roughly to maintenance, maybe just slightly above, and letting the performance dictate the increases in calories. So when it comes to, like, is there a certain, when you're looking at goals here, do you look at setting a body weight target? If so, how much weight are people expected to gain over time? How do you begin setting targets for somebody for this?
So it's much hard. I find it much easier to set body weight targets for someone in a fat loss phase, and then much easier to set performance goals for someone in a muscle gain phase. Because muscle gain is obviously a slower process than fat loss. You're probably looking at, ideally, if someone's in a fat loss phase, probably somewhere between like maybe 0.75 and 1% of their body weight lost per week is kind of what I would generally aim for, usually around the 1% mark. If we're looking at muscle gain, I mean, we're maybe looking at what, like 0.5% of their body weight per month, something like that. Like it's very hard to. So what do you say to someone like, okay, if they're 70 kilos, I want you to gain 0.1 kilos this week. It's not very tangible. Whereas if you turn around to someone and say, right, okay, your strength currently on a dumbbell press is here, in 8 weeks time, I'd like it to be somewhere around here. It gives, it can give someone a bit more of a tangible goal to push for. The reason why I kind of do that with their performance dictating the next calorie increase is because that'll generally tell you, especially if someone is well trained, it'll generally tell you when they actually need more calories. Is their strength still going up? Is there all their other markers like their sleep, their stress levels, their general feelings of recovery? Are they feeling fatigued? If they're not, if all of those things are kind of getting ticked off and they feel good and they're getting stronger every week, are you making a calorie increase just because they're in a gaining phase, or are you making a calorie increase because they need it? It's I think some people can kind of get lost in pushing calories higher and higher and higher and almost chasing scale weight. The problem with that is the body fat that goes on, I'm assuming you're going to want to take it off at some stage. So, like there's a point of diminishing returns when it comes to adding in calories and the amount of strength and the amount of muscle that you can build at any one time. Like I've been on the same calories since I think the start of this year. Body weight has crept up, and strength has increased pretty much week on week. I think we brought my non-training day calories up slightly. I think we might have increased calories by like 100 calories or something. But that just shows you that like my strength is increasing every single week. why do I need a calorie increase if all my other markers from a recovery standpoint are good as well, you know?
Couldn't agree with that more. And you're right in saying, like, I loved how you put it. It's like eventually you want to take that body fat off at some point. And like, I've been good at this before. Like, you feel like you see these things on Instagram where someone's on this amount of carbohydrates, and like, if they're progressing on less food, that's less stress for the digestive system, that's a better way of recovering. Like, in a way, is like, what's enough food that they can grow, but not too much that it's more for your Instagram story than it is actually for doing you any favors. And that's not to say that some people don't need a ridiculously high calories for that, but like, it's, as you say, it's very, very individual.
Yeah, there's a quick example of that is like, there's so many different variables as well, right? You might see on someone's Instagram story, they're having 600 or 700 grams of carbohydrates a day and whatever. But like, I've got a fella who is he's in the fire brigade, and he does like a ridiculously high amount of steps. Like, he could go on a night shift and he could come back with like 30,000 steps, and it's like, that he's easily able to take in 3,500-4,000 calories without gaining any body fat. But that's because his output is so high as well. So I think when you see a snippet of something on Instagram, just realize you don't know the full story. You don't know that person's background. You don't know what they do on a daily basis. And also, you don't know how much muscle tissue they have. Obviously, if they have more muscle tissue, they're probably going to be able to handle more food. Like, with the... What's that?
How depleted they are. Like, so like a big dude, you take, I'm just thinking of a big dude off the top of my head, but you take something like a Callum Raystrick and deplete him. Like, like, how much glycogen is he going to be able to store because he's a huge dude compared to, without insulting him for being too skinny, then take a me. I won't be anywhere near the same level of carbohydrates because I don't have the same level of like tissue.
Yeah, and as well, like, that's a really good point. And as well, like, if you look at what happens when you come out of a diet, let's say if you get really lean, and this is why I think a lot of people overspill after they diet, is if you get really lean and you go through, say, a 2 to 3 week period of eating just shit, but you're eating lots and lots of food, you are going to feel incredible. You're going to feel so full. Your training sessions are probably going to be really, really good, like in terms of performance. You're going to feel like Superman. You're going to be filling out your t-shirts, but then very, very quickly the body fat starts to pile on, and that initial feeling of kind of being full can drop away. And I think that's where a lot of people get caught out, is they fire calories up so quickly after a dieting phase, and they kind of bypass any way of them tracking where they're at. Now, obviously, I don't necessarily believe that if you finish a diet on, say, 2,000 calories, I don't necessarily believe that you need to add like 50 calories a week in order to see where, you're probably in a hefty deficit. You obviously, depending on the person, you can probably take an initial jump, judge where things are at, and then kind of go from there. But I kind of do that on a case by case basis. But yeah, when it comes to like calorie adjustments, I think people, they probably don't take training performance into account as much as they should.
So when it comes to like, when you're making calorie adjustments, is it a case of like, you'll get somebody, like say, maintenance just over, or where you presume that is, because obviously it's always a bit of a guess. And then you'll run training for a while, and when you see the logbook not going up for a period of time, and they're holding weight quite nicely and they're not looking fluffier, that's the time when you make a bump in calories?
Yeah, generally what I'll do is when someone comes out of a diet, I'll bring them up to a level that I probably still know they're in a deficit. Like maybe they're in a deficit, or maybe they're kind of where I assume they're around their maintenance. And then I will push calories as high as I can while basically watching scale weight. And the moment that I see scale weight start to increase consistently and a little bit quicker than I'd like, I'll bring calories back down that stair step that I've made, and then just hold them there. So what I've done is I've kind of found that point of, right, this is the amount of calories that their body wants to tolerate right now without really gaining too much body fat, if all other variables stay the same. That's only possible with a very adherent client, obviously. But that's generally what I'll do, is basically find the maximum amount of calories that person can handle, hold them there then until some other variable tells me that there's potentially the need for more calories. But generally those calorie adjustments, like when you found that point, and like I said, it does take someone who's very adherent, because that's how you get that really reliable data. When you found that point, generally the calorie increases don't come too often after that. Like they don't come too quickly, because you've kind of built calories as high as you can get them, and then it might be a few weeks or a month or two before another calorie adjustment is required. But obviously it's just done on a case by case basis. That's the way that I've done it, and it seems to work quite well, because sometimes I can find that, you know, you could bring someone's calories up, and they can kind of hold body weight on, let's say they could hold body weight on 2,500 calories. You could bring them to 2,700 calories and they still hold body weight. So it's like, if you don't stair step up and really try and push to find out where the maximum amount of calories that they can hold is, then you could potentially be shortchanging yourself with the amount of calories that you have someone sat on. So I think it's important to kind of get that across to the client, be like, look, we're kind of exploring how many calories you can handle right now, and trying to keep body composition in as good a place as possible. So that's kind of the way that I go about it. What about yourself?
Very similar. Like I think coming out of the diets I have 3 approaches, and as you said, it very much depends on the individual. If I've got someone at the end of a diet and they're just like, I just want to get out of this, I'll bring them up to where I think maintenance is straight away. And yes, you might get an initial jump in scale weight in the same way that you'd have an initial diet, and then, you know, weight drops off, but it gets them out of a diet. It gets them in a position where you can start growing quickly. As you said, like if they're too lean, you're adding in a bit of a stress there. So I want to get them out of that as quickly as possible. So that works for those kind of people. On the complete reverse end of that, you get people that are so scared about losing their abs that, like, if you did that and they got a little bit softer very quickly, they'd fall to bits and they wouldn't stick it out.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, those people I probably will make not 50 calories a week, but let's say, like, you know, 120 to 200 calorie increments from where they finished. But those people have to understand that it's going to be a longer process getting themselves back to where they need to grow. For most people, I'll probably go, right, where were they 4 to 6 weeks out from their diet? So if what I think maintenance is here, where they finish here, let's stick them here and then build up from that. And then exactly the same, shifting them to a performance mindset.
Yeah. Generally very similar to me, that last point there. It's kind of like taking a jump in calories, but being relatively safe with that jump. But obviously it's person dependent. If someone doesn't mind putting on a little bit, you can probably be a little bit more aggressive, and kind of say, okay, cool, we're going to find that point a little bit quicker. But, you know, they're generally okay with that, because you know, they're probably in a position where they're, you know, reasonably experienced, or they're happy enough with, you know, if they do put on a small bit of body fat, like they're not gonna go run for the hills. So I think it's, like you said, it's really is person dependent.
I think one of the things I also do, like even from the off, when I start with people early on, I start like getting the question, like, how do you plan what I call your transformation year? It's like if all of a sudden we finish dieting the end of July and the first thing we're thinking about is gaining a bit of body fat when they've got like a beef diet in 2 weeks, like it's not going to help anybody. But if I go right at the start early on, I'll go, right, where are the times you want to actually get leaner? Where are the times where you want to maintain, maybe throughout the summer? Where are the times you're going to wear a couple of extra layers? Maybe that's over the course of the winter, or unless you have loads of Christmas parties you want to be lean for. So you almost plan ahead of, like, they know, again, going back to setting expectations. I don't mind being fluffier when we build calories, because we've already planned it's going to coincide with the time where I don't really care about it as much anyway. And like, you know, it's like you're not telling someone in the height of summer to put on a bit of body fat. And I think doing that means I've got less of that backlash, and I can take the more aggressive approach coming out of the diet, because it's, as you said, the expectation's set. They know coming out of it, we've planned it around what they want to do. And if it means like they've got to hold on, like quite often with a diet, I'll try and get people to sit within 1 and 5 kilos of their best weight for 6 months, because you've got a competing goal, gain as much muscle as possible. But I found with most gym pop clients, it's like a lot of them, they learn to love the performance game. And a lot of it's just about, I don't want to get fat again. So if I can test how many calories they can get up to hold weight for a period of 6 or so months. And then after that, eventually when they sort of like go, oh, what's something new? It's like, right, then build calories up. So it might be a much slower process for a lot of people because it's just more about, they don't need to look like Arnie. They just want to look like a slightly fuller version of themselves with abs.
Yeah, that's it. And you know, it's with the and this is why it's so like there's so many different variables with it, because if you have someone who's who you are going to take, say, a calorie jump with, it's important to not get scared when you do see like a jump in scale weight from their lightest weight, because you know they're going to be somewhat depleted potentially, like coming into the end of their diet and things like that. So when you take a stair step up in calories, you're going to have the body essentially you know, soaking up those calories, maybe putting some carbs into glycogen stores and sort of replenishing the body in that respect. So if you do see, for example, with my photo shoot, I went and had I don't think we didn't come in very heavy on like carbs pre-shoot. I think I had a couple of days of maybe 250 or 300 grams of carbs in the week leading up to it, like the 2 days prior. And then the evening of my shoot, I went and had some, I think it was like some almond pie. So I had some almond pie, right? So Jen's mom bakes almond pie, and it's delicious. So yeah. Had that, and like I remember scale weight jumped like crazy the next day, jumped like 2 kilos. But and then my body weight kind of held around the 77 kilos. As I said, I was like mid 75s when I did the shoot. But like from that point, it was kind of like, right, we're pretty much, this is like the baseline, and we'll stair step calories up. And I held 77 kilos for a while. So I had that initial jump in weight, and then held, and we'll kind of stair step from there. So I think it's important not to, you know, make that initial calorie adjustment and then see a little bit of movement on the scales just because you've added in more food and go, oh fuck, you know. I think that comes into it as well. Yeah.
So like, obviously, I can go in chatting about this with you all day, but it's obviously like to make this not the first 4-hour podcast. The as like, if there was like a couple of like key lessons, let's say you had 3 things that you feel that could help someone that wants to build muscle, that's been listening to this, that you could take away from this. What were those 3 biggest takeaway points you would give somebody?
Number 1 would be to focus on your sleep and realize that without adequate sleep, you really are fighting an uphill battle. So that would be number 1, and that goes number 1 because I genuinely believe that is going to dictate how much muscle you're going to be able to build in any length of time. Number 2 is work hard in your sessions. Don't just go into the gym and go through the motions. Obviously, ideally, if you compare that with finding what suits you as an individual, like if you can find a coach who understands exercise mechanics, you know, maybe go and pay for even a few personal training sessions with them just so you can get the basics. Take notes if you have to, if you want to make that session go further. And really just focus on, like, ask yourself in your training sessions, you know, if you're in say, take for example a dumbbell press and you have a rep range of 8 to 10 reps, ask yourself at the end of those sets, you know, could you have done more? And when you it's only when you say don't train in a commercial gym for a while and then go back and train in a commercial gym, you look around and see people who through just their own lack of awareness are not pushing themselves to failure, yet they say they want to build as much muscle as possible. It's like you have to be bringing yourself to that point if you want to gain muscle. And then the third thing would be obviously nutrition. If, like I said, with the coach, with the exercise execution, if you can find someone who understands nutrition to give you some guidance, or even like there's so many resources online now to learn about, just learn about energy balance, just learn about calories in, calories out, learn about how that is interconnected with activity, and learn how that can obviously have a massive impact on pretty much everything when it comes to you know, your body weight, your body fat levels, manipulating body fat levels, performance. Because if you can get your nutrition right, if you can work hard, and you can you know, get your sleep in order, you've got pretty much the 3, I would say, biggest things covered off when it comes to actually making progress with your physique over the long haul.
I love that. I love the fact that sleep's number one as well. And I thought you were going to mention it, but you didn't quite. But like, it's also not only is sleep that has a big impact on how much muscle you can actually grow, but I also think a good amount of sleep will dictate the other things. Like, if you have a bad night's sleep, you're probably gonna like not do what you need to do from a nutrition standpoint. You're not gonna prep your food. You're not gonna be on top of things. Your training is gonna be lackluster. So like that leads on to the rest. Like a good training session doesn't make you sleep better, but a good night's sleep can make you train better. Yeah,
exactly. Very, very true. Very, very true. Yeah, nail on the head. I think that like sleep is just since I got on top of my sleep and since I've really been focusing on that area, everything has improved like tenfold. So I think anybody listening to this who really wants to build as much muscle as possible, then they have to get on top of their sleep and see it as just as important as their nutrition and their training, because it is.
I love that. So for anyone who wants to learn about like yourself, if someone wants to find you for regards to whether it's coaching or whether it's just to learn how actually big you're going to get before you actually start dieting, where can people find Kevin Hoare?
Yeah, so my Instagram is just at KHFITNESS. So that is where most of my content will be. I do have a Facebook, but that's just linked to my Instagram, so I don't really use it. It just kind of posts everything over there. And then I've got my website, which is www.khfitness.ie. If you want to see some more information about kind of coaching and stuff. But yeah, all my results and all that sort of stuff will go on Instagram. So that's where you find me.
One final question, as we're talking about bulking, and with bulking, you've got to talk about dirty bulking. What is your favorite fast food?
Favorite fast food? It's got to be Honest Burger, man. It's got to be. Yeah, Honest Burger is. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that burger and chips from Honest Burger is just the one, isn't it? Like it's.
I miss our Friday routine.
That bacon gravy. Does it?
Yeah, my Fridays just don't feel quite the same since moving out here.
Honest Fridays.
we don't get them.
I have a funny feeling that would fit right into my macros at the minute. So
I reckon you've probably got enough of them, right? Like, so I need to find a way of getting back without the travel ban. Right now, I'll leave it to you today. Thank you so much. This has been really, really good fun. And I'll speak to you very soon.
All right, good stuff. Thanks, Si.